Welcome to Raw Takes with Andrew Hody. We're back. We're better than ever. We are going for a little bit of a quality over quantity approach on the podcast. One new edition every week. It'll be every Tuesday evening. Make sure to check out Raw Takes with Andrew Hody on social media. All those links are in the description below for you. And always like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy the content we provide. Let's get right to it. So, a lot of big moves taking place. Obviously, the draft is not too far away. The NBA playoffs are upon us as well. The play-in tournament starts this week. And baseball, we're right in the thick of it already in the month of April. Everyone's played about 15 games, I want to say. Maybe a little bit more, depending on which team you are, or less. It's been about 15 games, roughly. So we're about a fifth of the 5%, I should say, the way through the season. 162 games, a long way to go. So, let's get things right off the rip. We'll start off a little bit with some football. Still the offseason, obviously, a lot of plentiful moves going on. Still talk about what teams are going to do with what picks in the draft, who the best prospects are. Quarterback discussion, obviously, heating up, especially here in Cleveland. Obviously, the Browns just signing Joe Flacco to a one-year deal worth $4 million. My thoughts on that, obviously, looking back on the 2023 season and what Joe Flacco was able to do for the Cleveland Browns, I personally think it's a move that makes him a bridge quarterback. I think this move, to me, says that the Browns are drafting Shedeur Sanders with the number 2 overall pick. I really do think that's what this move says to me. And the reason I say that is because Joe Flacco's 40 years old. He's obviously a great veteran quarterback to probably have in your locker room. But having said that, I don't think Joe Flacco is just going to come here and be the savior of this franchise right now. I mean, he had a great stretch of games in 2023, got us to the playoffs, ran comfortably in Kevin Stefanski's offense. I think that's part of why Joe Flacco's coming back here, is because he already kind of knows the system through Stefanski. He could be a nice bridge option for the Browns. I don't think he's going to be the superstar-style quarterback that he looked and appeared to be in 2023, and I still don't think he was all the way. He still turns the ball over a little too much. He does have a good arm. He'll throw it deep. He'll sling it. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy's a playmaker on the Browns roster, so he's going to have that weapon at his disposal. To me, this is just saying, though, that the Browns have him as a bridge quarterback, and they're going to draft a young quarterback with this draft. I don't know how to say it better than that. A lot of people in town are really excited that Joe Flacco's back, and they think we don't need to go the quarterback direction in the draft. Yeah, you do. Joe Flacco's 40 years old. He's not going to be with the Browns more than, I'd say, obviously clearly a year based on the deal, but probably more than 2 seasons. I know he's a fan favorite. I know he kind of brought fortune to the team in 2023 when they desperately needed it. But still, Joe Flacco to me is not going to be the savior of this franchise. And anyone that thinks that Joe Flacco is going to come here and be the long-term solution at quarterback for the Browns, you're not looking at this situation the way you should. I'm just going to say it straight up. Joe Flacco's coming back here to be the bridge quarterback, and he is not going to be here to mentor a rookie, but he is going to be here so a veteran can, I should say, the veteran is Joe Flacco, and maybe, I guess you could say, Kenny Pickett, who's been in this league 3 years. But the veteran's going to be Joe Flacco, and whoever the rookie quarterback is going to be, if it is Shedeur Sanders at 2, that's who I think it's going to be. But even if you draft a quarterback late in this draft, they're going to be sitting back, and they're going to be watching Joe Flacco, how he prepares, how he throws the football, how a veteran quarterback who's been around this league and around the block a few times prepares for an NFL game. That's what they're going to be doing. Joe Flacco's a bridge option at quarterback. He is not the long-term solution. Am I excited he's back? Yeah, I would agree. We had a good stretch of games in 2023. What I don't understand is how this city fell in love with Joe Flacco so soon. The only reason I say that is I get it. It was a nice playoff run. It was a good stretch of games that led the Browns to the playoffs, and he's coming back. It's a good feeling. It's a warm feeling for Browns fans. I get it. But my question is, did you forget that this man is second to Ben Roethlisberger in wins since 1999 against the Browns? When he played for the Baltimore Ravens many years ago, the Browns were expected to lose both those games. He beat the Browns twice a year, and it was a tradition that the Baltimore Ravens set in stone. And that's prior to Joe Flacco, too. The Ravens have handed us our ass since we came back in 1999. In fact, the Ravens are the former Browns. But having said that, Joe Flacco, get it. It's a warm, feel-good story because of 2023 and that stretch of games. But it's not like Joe Flacco's history with the Cleveland Browns is a good history. He would come to Cleveland or we would go to Baltimore, and we expected to lose. So Yes, is 2023 a feel-good story? Absolutely. But I'm not just willing to forget that Joe Flacco was the enemy for many, many years. I have many painful memories playing the Baltimore Ravens 2 Sundays a year. And we would face Joe Flacco, and Joe Flacco usually torched us. And that's because the Browns have been a bad franchise for a very long time. But having said that, that's hard for me to just let go. Am I willing to say, yes, it was a good stretch of games in 2023? It was. But, I mean, even in 2022 when we played the Jets, the one time we played Joe Flacco in a Jets uniform, he came back and torched that defense. And maybe Kevin Stefanski saw something for 2023. Obviously, it ended up working out. It's funny how the NFL ends up matching up. But you know what? Having said that, Joe Flacco knows how to win in Cleveland Browns Stadium. And Huntington Bank Field now, of course. He's going to probably still somehow know how to do that moving forward to a degree. But as I said, Joe Flacco's getting up there in age. He is not the long-term answer for the Browns. He is definitely a bridge option. The Browns are going to ride out the Joe Flacco train until they can, and then probably later this season, they're going to put in Shedeur Sanders or whichever rookie quarterback they draft, even if it is later in the draft, or they do it in the second round, for example. So we'll see how that pans out. Now, getting back to quarterbacks in this draft, am I a fan of the Browns taking Shedeur Sanders number 2 overall? No, I'm still not a fan of it. I do not necessarily think Shedeur Sanders is the best option for the Browns. If I were the Browns, would I wait out another year, though? Absolutely not. I would take either Shedeur Sanders or wait for a Jackson Dart or a Will Howard and develop them. I think you have to get a quarterback this year no matter what. If it's later in the draft, that's fine. Get Abdul Carter and you think one of these younger guys is a good second-round option, go for it. But having said that, I do not think Shedeur Sanders is NFL ready. Not just that, I think he needs time to develop, but I don't think he's even played the toughest competition in college football. So, to me, the fact Shedeur Sanders even has a first-round grade is honestly ridiculous. I think Travis Hunter, it makes sense, because Travis Hunter is a spectacular athlete, but at the end of the day, to me, Colorado is still streaky, because even though it's a great story, Deion Sanders did a terrific job there, and I don't want to take that away for that college program for how far they've come. Who do they really play competition-wise? They didn't play the Ohio States or the Oregons or the Texases or anybody that really was of worth in competing, and they were ranked and they lost to some pretty poor opponents. So to me, Colorado is kind of overrated per se. There's some feel-good stories there. I'm not going to argue that. It's a great story overall. Turning a 1-11 program into a 9-3 program within 2 years is a great story. There is no doubt about that. But I'm not willing to jump into Colorado being this all-world college football program. So to me, that's part of why I'm worried about Shedeur Sanders. Do I think Deion wants his son to come to Cleveland? I think he doesn't really care, to be quite honest with you. I think there's too much speculation on that about how Deion wants his son to go to X team, and this is how he's going to make it happen. I don't think the Sanders family has the kind of power or cachet the Manning family did in 2004. I think it's a much different time. I think Deion Sanders also may think highly of the Browns' culture and front office. I mean, he remembers 2023. 2023 did happen. I want to specify that. Even though 2024 was a disaster, if 2025 ends up being a much good feel-good story for the Cleveland Browns and they rebound and they're back to where they were in 2023, then I think 2024 is just going to look like a blip in the Browns franchise history, where they were really good in 2023, blipped out in 2024, but got back to it in 2025. And that's still possible. I want to emphasize that. The NFL is a years-to-years league. It's not a league where, like, you're the Chicago White Sox and you need X amount of time to develop all these guys. No. You could be a contender literally within a year. You could have the worst record in the NFL and then the next year be a Super Bowl contender. That's how this league works. So the Cleveland Browns could be really good this year. We just have to see it come to fruition. Obviously, everyone loves that Joe Flacco's going to be here. I get it. It's a feel-good story. He's coming back. But the Browns are drafting a quarterback, guys. There's no way around it. They have to draft a quarterback. And no, I'm not waiting until 2026. If you're Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, do you think you could afford to wait till 2026 to develop a guy next year, even if he's going to be really good? You got to get a guy right now who could be ready in 2026. You have a bridge option in Joe Flacco. Bench this young quarterback you draft. If it's Shedeur, if it's Jackson Dart, if it's, Jalen Milroe. I hope we don't draft Jalen Milroe. Please not. But having said that, if it's any one of these guys, Have him sit and develop. So, yes, am I not the biggest fan of Shedeur Sanders? I'm not. However, I think it's the best option for the Browns right now to get a quarterback, whether that be Shedeur Sanders, rather that be Jackson Dart or Will Howard or any of these guys. Get a quarterback at some point, develop him, and get him on the field by the end of this year. Especially if you're out of the playoff conversation, and let's say you're like an 8-9, 9-8 team. Yeah, you got to get a quarterback this year, guys. You cannot just afford to sit a guy and or wait a year and just go with Joe Flacco this year. You can't afford to do so. Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are at a point now where they're coaching for jobs, and that's the only way they're going to be able to make it through is if they get a guy and start to win this year. They got to get to 10-7, 9-8, at least be in that ballpark if they want to have jobs in 2026. They don't even necessarily have to make the playoffs, just have a winning season. Heck, I will even say they save their jobs if they're 8-9 and they lost a few games in the middle because Joe Flacco was just proven not to be the option and you made the change to Shedeur and he showed some promise at the end of the year. I'm willing to say that saves them their jobs too. I really am. So this year has really become about job saving if you're Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. Joe Flacco helps in that matter. I don't think Joe Flacco is going to have that spectacular run he did in 2023 again, but is it a feel-good story? It is. I'm going to emphasize that. But let's just think of what the long-term solution is here for the Cleveland Browns, and they got to go get a quarterback. He could be the bridge option, and a rookie quarterback could absolutely learn from sitting behind Joe Flacco, who's been around this league quite a few times. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the draft. So the other question is, if you don't draft Shedeur, where does he fall? I don't necessarily know if the Giants take him because of their quarterback situation. Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston are both there. To me, that screams they're preparing to not take a quarterback because they think Tennessee and Cleveland are going to do that. I think it's pretty much clear and obvious Tennessee is going Cam Ward. And I think based on the moves the Browns have made, they're going to go Shedeur Sanders at 2. So that means at 3, I would say if you're the New York Giants, probably getting Abdul Carter. Think that's your best bet. Which means Travis Hunter probably goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I don't see him falling much further. I think Abdul Carter is a much bigger need for the New York Giants than a Travis Hunter. I would not be surprised, though, if the Giants do take Travis Hunter, especially because it's a Deion guy. It's a big media market. That wouldn't surprise me at all if he goes to the Giants. As I said, I don't think they're going the quarterback direction either way just because they have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston in there. To me, that screams that Brian Daboll's coaching for his job and that they think this quarterback room this season at the very least is figured out and can get them through the 2025 NFL season. The Giants aren't taking a quarterback. Now, the next possible team to take a quarterback could be the Las Vegas Raiders, but based on the contract they gave Geno Smith, based on Geno Smith's experience with Pete Carroll, based on the fact Geno Smith has had 3 pretty darn good seasons in the NFL, that screams to me that I think the Seahawks like where they're at. Continuing on, you go to a little bit down the draft, the New Orleans Saints is a possible quarterback spot. What's going on with Derek Carr? I don't think that's really getting much attention, probably because the Saints don't have a high draft pick. So to me, I don't necessarily think if you're the Raiders could also get, I forgot to say, the Raiders could also get Travis Hunter, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be either Jacksonville or New York. But having said that, too, when you look at the Saints, when you go further down the order, if they could be in the quarterback market, but this Derek Carr thing is kind of weird. I don't know what's going on there. And I think that actually may dictate what Pittsburgh does. Pittsburgh is another spot that, we're not even talking about them. They need a quarterback, too. I mean, I don't think anyone's highlighting that Pittsburgh really needs a quarterback. Now, if I'm a Steelers fan, I'm rooting for a 4-13 season, and here's why. Because Mike Tomlin, you want out of the building. You think he's a bad coach, you want him gone. Why would you root for a 9-8, 10-7 season? If you want him fired, you got to have a losing season. Having said that, though, when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Pittsburgh Steelers do a great job not listening to their fans, as they shouldn't, because their fans are complaining about Mike Tomlin wanting to be gone, but they need a quarterback. So, is it possible for Shedeur to fall all the way down there? Depending on the Derek Carr situation, maybe so. Depending on what's going on with the Browns, if they don't draft a quarterback, it's possible. If the Giants don't shock the world afterwards, I still think the Giants already think they have their quarterback situation figured out. So, to me, is it possible for Shedeur to fall all the way to Pittsburgh? Yes, but I don't think it's very likely. But the Steelers need a quarterback, too. So, there's a lot of teams that need a quarterback that I think, may either think they have the option already figured out, have already a backup plan like the New York Giants do, or are just in a really weird position like the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I don't know. And, the Pittsburgh Steelers still may sign Aaron Rodgers, but that's still only likely a year or two of a plan. I don't know if that's going to really do much for the Pittsburgh Steelers out of giving them some leeway to draft a quarterback next year. So there is a lot of work to do if you're those teams and figuring out what's going to happen with your quarterback situation. But having said that right now, the draft is coming up. We'll do some mock drafts next week as we go over my thoughts on who will be drafted at what position. As I said right now, I think the two locks I really have based on this draft is I think Cam Ward's going 1 and Shedeur Sanders are going 2. That's really my only two locks right now. I'll have to analyze everything, and I'll have my official mock draft on the next edition of Raw Takes. But let's move on to basketball. Obviously, the play-in games are coming up. The Memphis Grizzlies and Golden State Warriors will take each other on the West, and that will be the 7-8 matchup. Golden State obviously falling to the Clippers. The Clippers got really hot at the end of the year. Props to them. I still think they're the retirement home of the NBA, but they still have some really good players. The Golden State Warriors now in position to be in a play-in game. They've never won a play-in game before. Do I think that's going to matter necessarily? I think they're going to beat the Memphis Grizzlies pretty easily. Then you look at the Eastern Conference. You have Atlanta playing Orlando for a play-in game. Whoever wins that, obviously, will play the Boston Celtics. And whoever wins the Western Conference play-in game, obviously, would play the Houston Rockets. To me, that matchup is pretty much even keel. I mean, Atlanta or Orlando could win that game, and to me, I think Orlando kind of got hot more so later in the year, so I think Orlando's better than Atlanta right now on paper. But to me, whoever loses that game is going to obviously take on the winner of the Miami-Chicago game. And you look out west, you have Sacramento and Dallas in that other matchup. So my thoughts on the play-in tournament, I still think the play-in tournament's extraordinarily stupid, and a lot of these teams have no shot to make a playoff run anyway, but except the Golden State Warriors. I think the Golden State Warriors are the one exception this time around. I don't think any of these other teams are contending for a championship, though. So for me, I'm not really going to be paying too much attention to the play-in game besides who matches up with the Cavs, Celtics, Rockets, and Oklahoma City Thunder. And who could give the most problems in those matchups. I think if you're either Oklahoma City or Houston, you want nothing to do with Golden State, obviously. Because Golden State played pretty well at the end of the season after they traded for Jimmy Butler. They look like they could be really threatening anybody in the Western Conference, to be quite honest with you. But do I think they're going to win the championship? I don't think so. I think Oklahoma City is by far the best team in the Western Conference and should honestly trailblaze their way to the finals. I really think they're going to do that. And the only other team that I think maybe can threaten them is the LA Lakers and maybe a Denver. But Denver's kind of a mess, making a stupid decision, in my opinion, firing Michael Malone. Having said that, though, that's a really weird firing to me, too, because what are the Cronkies thinking? They usually are very patient with coaches. I'm kind of stunned they fired Calvin Booth and Michael Malone the way they did. Yes, the Denver Nuggets are officially post-Malone, but having said that, he did win an NBA championship, and he was their coach for 10 years, and they had plenty of patience with him. So I don't know why that move was made, and that was kind of the shadier NBA firings that have taken place. David Griffin getting fired, too, from the Pelicans, that's totally understandable, but at the same time, he can't really control Zion's health. But I think David Griffin, if he were to go anywhere else, may have a really good shot at being an executive. Philadelphia keeping their top front office, I think, is questionable because they have been a mess this year. I don't think it's Nick Nurse's fault, though. He's just coaching, so I kind of like that approach that they're keeping the coach. And the Suns firing Mike Budenholzer. I mean, ever since the Suns fired Monty Williams, this is just karma for them. They're missing the playoffs. They're getting swept in the playoffs. They're not a good organization right now. And I get it's new ownership and whatnot, and they were in a good organization for a very, very long time. But you know what? When Monty Williams entered the building, he changed the culture of that organization, and they just tossed him out the door. The new ownership just said, one playoff loss series, toss him out the door, let's be a mess for 2 years. That's what the Phoenix Suns have done, and it's a disgrace to the NBA. So that's my thoughts on that move as well. But back to the playoffs, those are some of the coaching changes and executive changes. If I'm the Cavs, which matchup would I want? Obviously, I think the best matchup for the Cavs is to play the Chicago Bulls. I don't think the Chicago Bulls are going to win the play-in tournament, though. I think Miami has a better shot at that. If I'm the Cavs, would I want the Miami Heat? No, just because they have a really good culture, and I think they could drag that series out a little bit. I still think the Cavs would win that series. Atlanta, I mean, you did struggle with them earlier this season, and, George Niang and Karis LeVert do have some Cavs secrets, but DeAndre Hunter also has some Hawks secrets. I'm not really worried about playing the Hawks in a playoff series. I think that goes 4 or 5 games. The Orlando Magic kind of concern me, just because you matched up with them pretty well last year, and there was a regular season game where Evan Mobley didn't play. I don't necessarily know I love the Orlando matchup, but I still think the Cavs would win that series within 5 or 6 games. So if I'm the Cavs, I'm probably rooting for either Atlanta or Chicago to come out of the play-in. Having said that, you look at the Celtics, who should I root for? If I'm the Celtics, honestly, I don't really mind either one of those 4 teams coming out. I think Miami probably would give the Celtics the most problems, and that's just based on their recent history. That's not based on the fact I think the Celtics would struggle with the Miami Heat. I don't think they would at all. But out of those 3 teams, I think the team that could give the Celtics the most problems, I would say it's the Miami Heat. If you look at the Western Conference, Oklahoma City, who do I not want to face if I'm them? Oh, man, I would probably say Golden State. If Golden State falls to the 8th seed and I'm OKC, I don't think I would want anything to do with them on a playoff series, just because Golden State's kind of the dark horse right now. And that goes for the Houston Rockets, too. If it's Memphis, if it's Sacramento, if it's Dallas, I'm not worried if I'm Houston or not Golden State, but Houston or Oklahoma City. But Golden State's the dark horse out there in the West right now. They're the scariest team, I think, to want to face in a playoff series. If you're the Lakers, you're getting Minnesota in round 1. That series could go deep. I still think Luka Doncic is enough to give the Lakers the advantage in that series. Nuggets, Clippers, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say the Clippers probably win that series. The Nuggets didn't show much promise at the end of this season and made some questionable coaching decisions and firings and stuff like that. I don't think the Denver Nuggets are in any way, shape, or form ready to win a playoff series. They've been really out of sorts. And that's not to say Jokic hasn't done a terrific job. He has, but the rest of the team really hasn't. You look at the Houston Rockets, they're young and they're kind of just glad to be there right now. I don't think the Houston Rockets get past the second round, but I do think they have the potential to win a playoff series. And I do think if they do get Golden State in the first round, they could make Golden State have a living nightmare of a series. I really think they could. I still would say Golden State probably wins that series, though, just because they're more experienced. And honestly, looking at how tight the Western Conference is, literally anything could happen. So I'll just go over my playoff series predictions and my play-in predictions, and then we'll call it how we see it, and then we'll move on to baseball and wrap up the show. I'm going to take the Cavs against whoever they play in the play-in to win a series. I'm going to take, and we'll give my official bracket predictions, I guess you could say, later this week. I'll put out a tweet about it once we figure out who the play-in opponents are. But the Cavs, whoever they play, they're going to win that series. I'm going to say the Celtics in the same thing. They're going to go to the second round. New York Knicks, Detroit. That is an interesting series. That could be really physical. I think the Knicks are very injury-prone, though, however, and the Knicks could be kind of gassed. Detroit's physical. They're going to come get you now. Bickerstaff, though, has shown to have some coaching problems in the playoffs against the Knicks when you think of his time with the Cavs last year. But the Pistons played the Knicks and won the season series. I mean, so the Pistons, to me, might have some matchup problems that give the Knicks problems all across the board, despite injuries. So, to me, this is going to be the most exciting series in the Eastern Conference. But I'm going to take the Knicks to win the series just because I think the Knicks are a little bit more experienced. But Cade Cunningham's a superstar, and he is going to take the next step next season. I do not want anything to do with the Detroit Pistons, and they're really well coached under J.B. Bickerstaff in the future. So that's my thoughts there. I'm actually going to take the Knicks to win that series, but I think that goes 6 or 7 games. You look at the 4 or 5 matchup. Oh, man. Indiana and Milwaukee is an interesting one, too. Milwaukee has the best player in this series, but Indiana, I think, is the better team. I'm going to take Indiana to win that series in 6 or 7 games and end up matching up with the Cavs in the second round. To me, Indiana is just so good offensively, and the Bucks have had some trouble stopping really good offensive teams, hence the Cavs, for example. So to me, because the Bucks really can't defend very well, I think Giannis is going to show up and show out, but the rest of the Bucks are kind of a disaster. And I think Doc Rivers is done at the end of the season. I think Doc Rivers has unlocked some potential in Giannis Antetokounmpo, but to me, Milwaukee is really kind of on a downward trajectory. So to me, I think I like Indiana better in this series, and I'm going to take the Pacers to beat the Bucks in 6 or 7 games. I think that's a fair prediction there. The play-in tournament in the East, Atlanta versus Orlando. think those are even matched teams, but I'm going to take Orlando to advance and beat the Atlanta Hawks, and I think they're going to end up playing Boston in round one, and that'll be a 2-7 matchup, and then I'll say Atlanta will move on. Then you look at the other matchup between the the Chicago Bulls and Miami Heat. Excuse me, it took me a minute to think about that. But the Bulls and the Heat, I like the Heat in that game just because of their culture, so I think the Heat advance and take on the Hawks, and I actually think Miami sneaks up on Atlanta and snags the 8 seed away, and we get a Cleveland Cavaliers-Miami Heat first-round series just because of culture and stuff like that. So I think the Hawks are going to struggle in this play-in tournament, but I do think the Hawks show some promise, and if the Hawks end up making it through and moving on to the playoffs, I mean, that could give the Cavs some problems based on the early history, but I don't think it's going to matter too much regardless. So I'll say Miami over Atlanta there, and Miami kind of shocks the world and gets to the playoffs through the play-in tournament. So that's my thoughts on the Eastern Conference. The West, Oklahoma City, no matter who they play, I have them winning a series, even if it's Golden State. Houston, I would say, if it's anybody but Golden State, I'd have them winning a playoff series as well. I think if either one of those teams get Golden State in round one, it goes 6 or 7 games, and Golden State could end up winning that series, but unless it's OKC. I think OKC truly is better than Golden State. Houston, I'm not so sure, but those two are kind of up in the air for me right now. Once we have the play-in tournament, as I said, I'll release my official bracket and who I think is going to win where on X at Hody Andrews, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Then you move on to the LA Lakers-Minnesota series. This series could be good and it could go deep. I think it could go 6-7 games. I think Minnesota showed a lot of promise at the end of the year, but I don't think the Timberwolves have the better player in Luka Doncic right now. That's going to be the best player on the floor. So to me, because of that, the Lakers show a little bit more promise. Obviously, LeBron James' veteran presence will obviously help them out as well. So I'm going to take the Lakers in a deep series, 6-7 games to win that round one playoff series. And then you look at the 4-5 matchup, Nuggets and Clippers. I like the Clippers. They just got hot at the last end of the year. I still think they're the retirement home of the NBA. I think the Nuggets, they already have championship pedigree. They're a little younger. They have good veteran talent. But to me, with the coaching woes and stuff like that, the firings and all that kind of shady stuff, I think Ty Lue is going to end up coaching the Clippers out of that kind of situation and end up winning that playoff series. So I think the Clippers advance and play whoever wins the 1-8 series. I think the Clippers might actually end up taking out the Denver Nuggets. But I will say this, the Denver Nuggets definitely will have the best player on the floor in Nikola Jokic, but the second best player on the floor will be on the Clippers side, and that's Kawhi Leonard. And Kawhi Leonard was really locked down at the end of this season, and Kawhi Leonard could have a little bit of a resurgence here. So we'll see how that takes place for the LA Clippers. But based on age, I would say the Nuggets probably have the advantage, but based on the recent stretches, I'm going to go with the Clippers. So that's my thoughts on the NBA playoffs. Let's wrap everything up with some baseball talk. My Cleveland Guardians right now, they're just above 500. They're coming off a series against Kansas City where they won the series 2-3. I'm totally fine with where the Guardians are with how they started the season. The only real thing that I think I'm disappointed by is the fact the Angels took a 2 games out of 3 in that series, and I don't think the Angels are worth a lock of squat, so to me that's kind of disappointing. But you look around Major League Baseball right now, and I'm taking a look at the standings real quick. Detroit, right now in first place overall. Detroit's going to be tough. I don't want to play them. Texas looks really good. The LA Angels are in first place in that division, which is still a shocker to me, but I still don't think the LA Angels are going to be worth a lock of squat by the end of the season. That's surprising to me, that the Angels have been as impressive as they have been. Kind of disappointed by where the Red Sox are right now. The Red Sox, to me, should be above 500, and they've played some weaker opponents, but the Red Sox have been a little bit disappointing. You look over at the National League, and you see that the Dodgers are the Dodgers, obviously. They're taking care of business. The San Diego Padres, they're taking care of business too. The Padres and the Giants even. I mean, I'm looking just at the overall standings. San Diego's in first place. The Giants are in second, and the Dodgers are in third. I think the Dodgers obviously outmatched all those teams. Well, San Diego got off to that 7-0 start, and that tremendously helps you get in that position. They've been on fire this year. The Dodgers, I think, is going to be hard out for anybody. The Giants, I mean, you have players almost hitting for the cycle on that team. The pitching is kind of locked in. I still think when you look at overall pitching rotations, I would say the Dodgers are probably the best when you look at everybody from pitcher 1 to pitcher 5. But the National League, the Mets obviously doing well too. Frankie Lindor with a big game yesterday. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. It's still early in the baseball season. We'll definitely be talking a lot more baseball on the show as the season progresses. To me, it's still too really early to determine who the good teams are and who the bad ones are. I think by the time we get to the middle of May, we're going to start to get a better picture of it. Right now, I think the teams I could say I'm definitely sold on, I'd say the Padres, obviously. I'd say the Dodgers for sure. The New York Yankees, believe it or not, no. They have good offensive talent, but I still think defensively they're not a great team. And I picked them to not make the playoffs this year, and I'm still riding out with that prediction. Teams I'm kind of disappointed in to start the year, I'd say the Boston Red Sox, just because they lost a few to the White Sox. The White Sox, granted, they're not as bad as they were last year, but they're not good by any stretch of the imagination. So, to me, that's kind of an interesting one as well. But the White Sox are still terrible. The Angels being above 500 in first place as of right now is kind of weird, but I still don't believe they're going to do squat throughout the rest of the season. So to me, that's kind of a shocker. But they still have some decent bats in that lineup. Obviously, you have Mike Trout. I think Logan O'Hoppy's done a pretty good job to start the year. So you have good bats in the Angels lineup. But to me, it's still really too early to make a good assessment about who's really good and who's really bad. I could say, pinpointing a few of the teams, the Detroit Tigers are a team I think are in the top tier. I think you look at San Francisco, San Diego, LA, all those California teams outside of the Angels, and obviously the Athletics. I think those three teams in Cali are really good. I think you look at the New York Yankees. Defensively, they have some issues. Boston's a disappointment right now. The Guardians are kind of where I think they would have been to open the year, because I think Detroit was going to get off to a hotter start. I thought Kansas City would get off to a hotter start too, but I still think the Guardians are in prime position right now. Minnesota's been a big disappointment overall. So, yeah, I mean, there's still a long way to go, and we're just getting things started here in Major League Baseball. And there's a whole summer ahead of us. The dog days aren't even there yet. So we'll have to see what takes place throughout the rest of the Major League Baseball season. But for right now, I'm just the most surprised by the Angels and the Red Sox, I would say. The Angels being above 500 and the Red Sox playing some bad teams really poorly. I think the Red Sox should get some give-me games here, and they're not doing that. I think the Red Sox are a lot better than the record says they are, but we'll see how the season progresses for them. That's my thoughts and opinions on Raw Takes with Andrew Hody. We will be back next Tuesday for a full edition of the show, plus more of my thoughts. We'll have a mock draft out. We'll have my official NBA playoff predictions. I will release those this week before the playoffs start. The play-in tournament games, you heard my predictions there, so I will have those posted as well. Stay tuned next Tuesday evening for a new edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hody. We're going for the quality over quantity approach with one new episode every week. Have a good one, everybody.